So it's time someone stood up to the BS the MAGA crowd is spewing about the crisis at the border. And that's what we're going to do in today's video. Let's get to it. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So recently, as you might have noticed, I've been watching a lot of Fox News, reacting to different videos that they've been posting on their website. One thing that I've realized, though, as I've been watching Fox News, is how obsessed they are with the border crisis. I mean, literally, every story they talk about, somehow it morphs into something about the border crisis. You would be hard-pressed to find a video on any subject, even something as mundane as electric vehicles, that does not mention somehow the border crisis. It's a completely different world from the world the rest of us live in who are watching normal news. And you can see why these people living within the Fox News bubble believe that there is some horrible crisis going on at the border. The problem is, it's just not true. Let's watch this video here and do some analysis.
Every American city is now a border city. Fentanyl is now the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. Biden's open border policies are killing Americans.
Okay, let's start with this. Number one, the reason why we know that there is a lot of fentanyl coming from Mexico into the United States is because of the fact that we've been seizing a lot of fentanyl on the border between Mexico and the United States. So if we're seizing it, then that means we are enforcing the law, doesn't it? This is kind of the problem that you run into with this analysis that you see all the time on Fox News, which is they take this attitude that, oh, look at all this evidence that people are coming across the border and that our nation is not enforcing its laws. But the information they use to back their claims is evidence that the government has actually been arresting a lot of people at the border. In other words, actually enforcing the laws, which is a direct conflict. So let's keep watching here.
Why is the White House not treating this like the crisis it is?
Fentanyl is now poisoning and killing hundreds of Americans every day as Mexican drug cartels take advantage of the chaos at our southern border. The White House.
Again, this is the thing that they talk about, the chaos at the southern border. Notice the framing that they use here. Chaos at the southern border. There's no chaos at the southern border. Are there people who try to cross the border illegally? Of course there are. Are most of them arrested? Yes, they are. But chaos, you get this image of this constant seething there, which is absolutely without basis in reality. Let's keep watching.
Still refusing to do what needs to be done to stop them. Ron Video.
Again, they talk about refusing what needs to be done to stop them. The reason we know that there's a lot of fentanyl coming across the border is because we're seizing at the border. The reason that we know that there are more people trying to cross the border illegally is that we're arresting more people at the border illegally. So if we're not doing what needs to be done to stop these things, then why are we stopping these things? Doesn't make sense. Let's keep watching.
Is the former acting director of ICE and former chief of the U.S. Border Patrol. Ron, it's great to have you on. 300 Americans a day roughly dying of opioid overdose, most of those fentanyl. The White House, Joe Biden, didn't mention it at all last night. But it gets even worse, Ron, because
So I love how they act as if this is some new crisis here. In fact, this is a crisis that's been brewing for some time now. And in fact, it was growing for a long time during the Trump administration, and I never saw any speeches where they talked about it. Let's keep watching.
The White House is now, insulting America's intelligence by telling them that people aren't just walking across the border. It's not happening.
Because people aren't just walking across the border. The evidence that they use to show that people are walking across the border is how we're arresting more people than ever at the border. So if we're arresting them at the border, they're not just walking across the border. Let's keep watching.
They have no credibility on this issue. The president can't use his primetime speech to talk about what's going on with fentanyl and drug overdoses that are going to account for over 100,000 deaths in the United States this year. And so
Okay, this has been one of the items of spin that we've seen on Fox News relative to this Biden gave. President Biden specifically gave a speech about the extremism in the MAGA ranks and how they're trying to undermine American democracy. This was not a speech about the border crisis, which I know on Fox News everything is about the border crisis, but that's not what this speech was about. This was not a speech about fentanyl. And in fact, just the other day, Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, talked about fentanyl and steps that the White House is taking to address it. But the fact that we went through 4 years of Trump with this crisis getting worse and worse and worse, and they never did anything about it, completely escapes the recollection of these people when they start talking about Joe Biden. Suddenly everything is Joe Biden's fault. Let's keep watching.
Can't talk about fentanyl. He can't talk about all the drugs coming across the border from Mexico, because that's where 90+% of them come from. He can't talk about the 700+ people who are dying in the pipeline trying to cross that border, because he's going to have to bring attention to the disaster that they've created by pulling down all the policies that were working at the southwest border and controlling that border. When this president took over, they had 45-year lows in traffic along the southwest border. Now, we have a demand problem with drugs.
The reason that fewer people were crossing the border was because the United States was in the middle of a recession. We're in the middle of the whole COVID recession. There was no reason to cross the border. Things are good in the United States here. The fact that people want to come to the United States shows that things are good. And again, as people have illegally crossed the border, they've been arrested. So they say, oh, look at all those arrests. It just shows how many people are trying to cross the border. Yeah, because they want to come here. There's good reason to come here, as opposed to when Donald Trump was president. Let's keep watching.
Fentanyl is killing people because a lot of people don't know they're taking fentanyl.
Yeah.
They're buying drugs off the dark web or off the street corner, and they don't know they're taking fentanyl inside of something else. And so it's a big problem, and they have to.
Now, that's absolutely true, and unfortunately, I have personal experience with this where I have family members who have actually passed as a result of their addiction to drugs, and in the cases when they passed, it appears that they were taking what they thought were opioids when in fact they were laced with fentanyl. This is a very serious problem, and I have to say, the administration taking this seriously, which is good. But anyone who believes that the drug problem in America is something new that started under Joe Biden has been hiding under a rock somewhere. That is just not the case. Let's keep watching.
Avoid it because that brings attention to the disaster that it's at the border.
Again, listen to the language that they use when describing the border. Chaos at the border, disaster at the border. If you were to go to the border, you would see none of that. It would just be a border. In many cases with pretty heavy police presence because they do a lot of policing there. But yet these descriptions that then get internalized by people watching Fox News, many of whom have no exposure to the border except what they see through Fox News, believe that there is some kind of horrible war going on there with people constantly crawling across the border, which just isn't reality. Let's keep watching.
Juan, they did answer a question from the White House from our own Peter Doocy earlier this week. So we've been showing all week, if you could show call for number one, this is a map showing the fentanyl gateways into the United States.
She points out the fact, by the way, that Peter Doocy asked a question at the White House that was answered by Karine Jean-Pierre about fentanyl, and yet they claim that the White House is doing nothing about it. This is how Fox News works. They talk in doublespeak, throwing out trigger words that kind of get your emotions going. But when you look at it, it just doesn't make any sense based on the facts. Let's keep watching.
From Mexico. And then you had Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, say to Peter Doocy this week, well, please pull up call for number two, that fentanyl seizures are up by 200%. So she said, so that proves that we are doing all that we need to do because the CBP has actually seized this much fentanyl. How would you respond to her saying that they've done their job?
Well, I'm grateful that there are people out there, Border Patrol, CBP, the DPS you showed earlier, that they're making these seizures and protecting us from that poison. But let's not pretend that the disaster that's going on at the border is somehow doesn't exist just because we made more seizures than we did last year.
You see, this is the double talk that you get on Fox News. On the one hand, they're admitting the facts that, yes, they're doing more seizures. But then they switch to, oh, let's not pretend that there's not this emergency or chaos going on at the border. When in fact, the data that they're using shows that we're doing more to stop the chaos down at the border. So let's keep watching.
The reason that there's more fentanyl in the pipeline is because these cartels are becoming more and more emboldened because they essentially control the traffic across the border between the ports of entry. And yeah, it's great that we catch it, but it's not everything. It's not, when the Highway Patrol goes out and writes 3 speeding tickets, they don't go back and tell the people that they work for that there's nobody on the highway that's breaking the speed limit. That's just not how it works. I'm glad that they're doing everything that they can, but there's much more that needs to be done. What's the plan for the border? When are we going to continue to have hundreds of thousands of people per month crossing the border?
Okay, let's just speak. One thing that's not going to happen is what this administration did, which is put children in cages. Let's have a little bit of sense of perspective here. Let's keep watching.
And giving these cartels millions and millions of dollars a day?
Yeah, I guess that's the question right there. I mean, what is the plan? What is the remedy for this? Right? Because you just can't let this keep happening. And, you have Democrats saying, oh, the cartels are smuggling this through border ports and entries and stuff. It's not true. We see this every day. They are sending these drug mules across with a lot of this fentanyl every single day.
And they're getting arrested, which is, again, the double talk that you hear on Fox News all the time. And in terms of there being a solution, they're actually right. This is a difficult problem. The Trump administration couldn't stop it. And so they're pointing fingers of saying, oh, this is Joe Biden's problem, is just completely disingenuous because they couldn't stop it and Joe Biden could stop it. And as they were trying to stop it, one of the things that they did, that being putting children in cages, was completely immoral and illegal. But that's a story for another day. The irony of this whole situation is I am actually somebody who believes that we need more immigration, not less. And in fact, I've been critical of the Biden administration for being so aggressive in enforcing the immigration laws. In fact, if you want to see where I criticize Biden on that issue, check out this video over here. No administration is perfect, and when Joe Biden does something I disagree with, I'm willing to point it out. Let's see if the Republicans do that with Donald Trump. Well, I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued. Thank you.